I was the crown princess with royal blood, yet I struggled for 3 agonizing years to give birth to a single fragile daughter. Meanwhile, my younger sister married the second prince and effortlessly bore him 5 strong sons. The crown prince humiliated me publicly, calling me a barren failure. Then, in a drunken rage, he murdered my baby girl right before my eyes. I died from the grief and shock, but when I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the imperial selection ceremony. I watched as Crown Prince Damien reached for my sister Elena without hesitation. In that instant, I knew he had been reborn too. He thought changing women would give him the sons he craved, completely unaware that we Rivera daughters possessed extraordinarily fertile constitutions. Bearing children came as easily to us as breathing. The real issue was his depleted vitality, making it nearly impossible for any woman to conceive with him. I lifted my eyes to the Emperor, noting the magnificent golden aura surrounding him, and stepped forward with determination. Your Imperial Majesty, I have long admired you. Please grant me this one request. Before we begin, if you're new here, please click the subscribe button and like our video, it helps more stories come to life. Enjoy the story. The Grand Hall overflowed with the Empire's most distinguished young ladies. All the princes had reached the age to marry, and anticipation filled the air. Choose according to your hearts, the Emperor declared from his throne, his voice carrying the authority of a seasoned ruler. His Majesty Sebastian had recently turned 36, radiating the commanding presence of a man at his peak. The moment he finished speaking, Crown Prince Damien strode directly to Elena, grasping her hand possessively. Father, I desire Miss Elena, the Prime Minister's eldest daughter. The declaration sent ripples of shock through the assembly. The Crown Prince had countless legitimate noblewomen to choose from, yet he insisted on selecting a concubine's daughter as his primary consort. An unprecedented breach of protocol. But I understood immediately. Damien had been reborn as well. He held my sister's hand tightly while she leaned into him, surprised and thrilled, their eyes locked in a way that shut out everyone else. The Emperor frowned with concern. Damien, the imperial astrologer, prophesied that the Prime Minister's legitimate daughter carries the Phoenix destiny. I believe Isabella would be more suitable for you. Before His Majesty could continue, Damien interrupted boldly. Father, Elena is also the Prime Minister's daughter. Who can say the Phoenix destiny doesn't belong to her? How can celestial fate be determined by birth status? As he spoke, his eyes flickered toward me with barely hidden contempt. I understood perfectly. In our previous life, that very prophecy made him choose me as crown princess without hesitation. He proclaimed such noble destiny could never belong to a concubine's daughter. Yet after our marriage, when I failed to produce a male heir, I became the capital's laughingstock while he endured humiliation. Meanwhile, Elena had married the second prince and delivered healthy sons one after another, dramatically elevating her husband's status. Now given another chance, how could Damien repeat his mistake? Seeing his unwavering determination, Elena was moved to tears. From childhood, she possessed beauty and talent equal to mine, but her status as a concubine's daughter meant she lived perpetually in my shadow, harboring deep resentment. Damien's words clearly touched her wounded pride. She straightened and met my gaze, her eyes gleaming with smug satisfaction. Recognizing Damien's resolve, the Emperor stopped objecting and issued an immediate decree establishing Elena as crown princess. Then came time for the other princes to select their consorts. Observing that the crown prince had chosen the Prime Minister's concubine daughter, all the other princes wisely selected consorts of even lower status, careful not to overstep. Soon every young lady had found a match, leaving only me standing alone. Elena regarded me with a mocking smile dripping with scorn. At that moment, the Emperor descended from his throne, approached me directly, and asked gently, Isabella, do you have someone in your heart? Shall uncle arrange a match for you? As the Prime Minister's legitimate daughter with a princess mother, my status was unmatched throughout the capital. Now that all the princes had chosen, leaving only me was deeply improper. The familiar address uncle stemmed from our first meeting years ago at the Prime Minister's estate when I playfully called him that. In truth, he was merely 12 years my senior. Using this intimate address before the entire court was clearly meant to show me special favor. I raised my head to study him. His handsome features were striking, his presence enveloped in swirling golden energy. Sudden inspiration struck. The Empress position had remained vacant so long. Wasn't it precisely reserved for someone with my phoenix destiny? I smiled gracefully, bowed respectfully, and spoke softly. Isabella has long admired your imperial majesty. I humbly ask that you grant my deepest wish. Sebastian appeared genuinely stunned, lowering his voice. Isabella, don't be rash. I am your uncle. Before he could finish, I raised my head and blinked at him innocently, allowing tears to well in my eyes as I spoke with a trembling voice. Doesn't uncle need Isabella either? He immediately showed signs of panic, gently reaching out to wipe my tears. Don't cry. Please don't cry. I agree. Everything will be as you wish. I stopped crying instantly, the corners of my mouth lifting in triumph. He remained unchanged, unable to bear seeing me shed tears. Sebastian took my hand before everyone and summoned the imperial herald to announce an official decree, selecting an auspicious date to welcome me into the central palace as Empress. Damien stared at me intently, his eyes filled with darkness. Elena beside him also displayed obvious displeasure. His gaze fell on our joined hands, and he spoke coldly. Father, please reconsider. The Empress position has been vacant for years. Such a decision cannot be made lightly. Moreover, Miss Rivera is the same age as your son. Looking at her delicate constitution, I fear she cannot shoulder the responsibilities of managing the 6 palaces. I curved my lips into a slight mocking smile. Does the Crown Prince suggest His Majesty is too old and unworthy of me? Or is the Crown Prince afraid that I might bear sons for His Majesty, thereby threatening your position? Sebastian's expression darkened as he shouted angrily. When I choose an Empress, do I require your approval? Damien fell silent, though his glance toward me brimmed with resentment. I felt secretly delighted. He must feel worse than swallowing live insects. His former crown princess had now become his stepmother. Who could tolerate such an unbearable situation? As we departed, when no one else was near, Damien approached me with a half smile. Isabella Rivera, don't delude yourself into thinking you can bear sons. You lack that destiny. The crown prince position can only be mine. I shrugged indifferently and returned to the Prime Minister's manor with Elena. News of Elena becoming crown princess had already reached her mother, Catherine. The moment I stepped from the carriage, I saw her craning her neck eagerly. Though Catherine enjoyed favor in the manor, she was ultimately just a concubine, always forced to remain cautious beneath my mother's authority. Now that her daughter had not only participated in the selection alongside the legitimate daughter but had even surpassed her to become crown princess, Catherine could finally hold her head high. She grasped Elena's hand and declared loudly, "My good daughter, I always knew you possessed exceptional fortune." Then she turned toward me. I wonder which prince Miss Isabella was selected by. Though the status surely cannot compare to crown princess, being a prince's consort remains respectable. Miss shouldn't feel too melancholy. Seeing Catherine's triumphant loss of composure, Elena felt uneasy and quickly covered her mother's mouth. "Mother, please say no more. I simply found it amusing." Elena's appointment as crown princess had been announced by Sebastian on the spot, but establishing an empress required approval from the ancestral temple before public proclamation. Catherine naturally knew nothing of this. She assumed I had married some prince with inferior status, hence her audacity. "What do you mean? Now that you're crown princess, I can't speak? This ungrateful child. I've been cautious all these years for your sake. Now when I finally can speak freely, I'm still being silenced. What a waste raising you was." Catherine glared at Elena. Elena was furious, grinding her teeth as she lowered her voice. "Sister is the Empress personally appointed by His Majesty." Catherine immediately froze, her complexion cycling from pale to flushed before she fell to her knees with a heavy thud, trembling as she begged my forgiveness. I paid no mind, merely cast Elena a cold glance and returned to my chambers. Soon after, the imperial edict establishing the Empress was officially issued. Sebastian's gifts flowed continuously into the Prime Minister's manor, and everyone throughout the capital praised His Majesty's infinite favor. Toward the new Empress. Meanwhile, ever since becoming crown princess, Elena went out with Damien every single day. Each time she returned late at night, she wore an expression of shy satisfaction. I could easily guess what they were doing. Damien was desperately impatient, hungry to secure an heir. 10 days later, Elena was carried to the Eastern Palace in an elaborate bridal procession. Having lived through one lifetime already, Damien remained obsessed with producing heirs. According to palace servants, after the wedding ceremony, Elena received extreme favor, being thoroughly exhausted for several days until she couldn't leave her bed. Hearing this news, I couldn't suppress my laughter. In the previous life, he blamed me entirely for our inability to produce sons. I'm afraid he'll face bitter disappointment again. He believed being with Elena would grant him sons, completely unaware that we Rivera daughters were naturally blessed with extraordinarily fertile constitutions. Pregnancy and childbirth came as easily to us as breathing. That's precisely why she bore a houseful of children for the second prince in our previous life. But Damien's vitality was depleted, making it extremely difficult for any woman to conceive by him. Even someone with a constitution as fertile as mine had been wasted on him. In my previous life, watching him suffer daily over children, I took dangerous risks using the Rivera family secret fertility methods. For 3 consecutive years, I consumed bitter, nauseating medicine, barely managing to give him one daughter. Who could have known the daughter would be born weak and sickly, despised by him to the point that in his drunken madness, he killed the child. My poor little treasure, arriving in this world only to depart so quickly. Having murdered my child, I would definitely make Damien pay 1,000, 10,000 times over. Shortly after the 6th lunar month came my grand wedding to the Emperor. I wore the magnificent phoenix crown and brilliant crimson robes, meticulously prepared, sitting in the bridal chamber waiting. Before long, Sebastian entered with slightly unsteady steps, reeking of ceremonial wine, and sat beside me. He whispered in my ear, "Isabella, marrying me, have I wronged you? You're in the bloom of youth while I've already aged." I raised my head and looked firmly into his eyes. "Your Majesty, Isabella truly cherishes you." I wasn't deceiving him. From our very first meeting, when he gently handed me that bright red apple, my heart was moved. At that time, I didn't know he was the supreme ruler. I simply thought he was an honored guest of father's, innocently calling him uncle, which made my parents pale with fright. But he seemed to like it immensely, smiling until his eyes curved. Later, when I married the crown prince and remained childless for years, everyone claimed it was my fault. Only Sebastian never blamed me, patiently comforting me instead. Such a wonderful man. How could I let him slip away again in this lifetime? Hearing my heartfelt confession, joy briefly flashed in his eyes but quickly dimmed. "Little Isabella, you only like your uncle as family, not as a man." I hastily interrupted him, pressing my lips to his. Right or wrong, uncle should experience for himself. I no longer hesitated, immediately removing my wedding garments and pressing him beneath me. Fire blazed instantly in his eyes, as if he wanted to devour me whole. "Little temptress, it's you who has bewitched me. Don't regret it later." I watched the bed curtains above sway rhythmically, finally becoming intoxicated and drowning in his passionate embrace. That night, the palace maids serving outside were exhausted, going in and out to change the bathing water 7 times. The next morning, news of the Emperor and Empress's passionate devotion spread throughout the entire court and harem. In the blink of an eye, I had resided in the central palace for over a month. Due to my exceptionally fertile constitution, I conceived with remarkable ease. After just 1 month, I already carried a little prince in my womb. If Damien discovered I was pregnant, would he go absolutely mad? Today, I deliberately waited for him along the path he must take to the imperial study. The crown prince was heir to the nation, so Sebastian paid special attention to his education, summoning him every day after morning court. Sure enough, before long, Damien appeared exactly as predicted. Upon seeing me, his eyes held undisguisable hatred, yet he still had to respectfully bow. "Stepmother." He bowed formally, and I deliberately made him remain standing for an extended time. He seemed to sense the hostility emanating from me and straightened without waiting for permission. I coldly reprimanded him. "Insolent! Does the crown prince look down upon this empress?" Seeing no one around, Damien began showing his true nature. So what if I do? Don't think being Empress makes you noble. Once I ascend the throne, you'll only live under my control. He appeared smug, completely failing to notice the flash of bright yellow robes at the corridor corner. I deliberately lowered my voice, my eyes full of provocation. Is that so? Is the Crown Prince absolutely certain of a smooth ascension? He frowned, pointing his finger threateningly at my face. What exactly are you implying? Before he could react, I deliberately fell backward in the direction his finger pointed. From behind, it would appear exactly as if he had pushed me. Before I could hit the ground, a familiar figure rushed out urgently, catching me tightly in protective arms. I was already safe in Sebastian's embrace. I cried out in deliberate pain. Your Majesty, the Crown Prince pushed me. My stomach hurts terribly. I moaned weakly while Damien hastily explained. Father, I did no such thing. This woman is deliberately framing me. She clearly fell by herself. The eunuch standing nearby pointed in horror at my dress, shouting loudly. Look quickly. Her Majesty is bleeding. Sebastian's gaze immediately dropped, seeing the shocking dark crimson stain spreading across my gown. He completely lost control, backhanding Damien with 2 fierce slaps, then urgently summoned the imperial physician. The imperial physician frowned deeply, his hand trembling as he felt my pulse, cold sweat beading on his forehead. What exactly is wrong with the Empress? It was merely a fall. Why is there bleeding? Sebastian's expression was terrifyingly dark, cold air enveloping the entire hall. Seeing the physician's prolonged silence, Damien laughed coldly. Father, I truly never touched her. She definitely fell deliberately to frame me, and that blood must have been prepared beforehand. The imperial physician suddenly prostrated himself before Sebastian, shouting loudly. Congratulations, Your Majesty. Her Majesty the Empress is with child. Hearing this announcement, Sebastian was extremely excited. Though he already had several princes from previous consorts, the harem had been without news of pregnancy for an extended time. I had only recently married and was already pregnant. It was truly beyond imagination. Damien was struck utterly speechless, swallowing his unfinished words, his expression one of complete disbelief as he muttered. Pregnant? How is that even possible? She isn't. Sebastian heard every word clearly, glaring and shouting. I may no longer be young, but I'm not yet at the point where I cannot make a consort pregnant. Do you wish that I cannot produce legitimate children? Damien hastily protested his innocence, but Sebastian paid no attention, turning instead to question the physician about the child's condition. After confirming that both mother and child were safe, he finally felt somewhat relieved. Then why hasn't the Empress awakened yet? Sebastian asked with concern. The imperial physician sighed deeply. Her Majesty's body is naturally delicate, and she's newly pregnant. She should be carefully nourished. Today's sudden fall and tremendous shock seemed to have trapped her consciousness in frightening nightmares. She must be meticulously tended, or both mother and child will face grave danger. Sebastian turned to look at Damien, speaking with icy coldness. Crown Prince, you dared to harm the Empress. If anything happens to the little prince, I will depose you without hesitation. Damien turned frighteningly pale, trembling as he defended himself. Father, she spoke provocatively first, claiming I was unfit to be crown prince. Moreover, I truly didn't push her. At this moment, I, who had been pretending unconsciousness, suddenly jerked awake, immediately throwing myself into Sebastian's protective arms and sobbing. Your Majesty, the Crown Prince wanted to harm our child. The Crown Prince also declared that even though I'm Empress, I'll still have to depend on him after he ascends the throne. Sebastian comforted me tenderly, speaking gently. Don't be afraid. With me here, no one can harm you or our child. He looked at Damien and snorted coldly. You speak of ascending the throne. Now the Empress carries the legitimate son of the Central Palace. You'd best understand your position. I can establish you as Crown Prince, and I can just as easily depose you. At this moment, Damien was completely bewildered. He had only been made Crown Prince due to being Sebastian's eldest son. He possessed no outstanding achievements and no powerful family supporting him. Now the Empress was pregnant, and he was implicated in attempting to harm the imperial heir. His position was fundamentally shaken. In the end, Sebastian showed a degree of mercy, only punishing him with house arrest and stripping away his authority over state affairs. But being punished this severely precisely when I became pregnant was enough to keep him sleepless with worry. All of this was merely a small greeting gift I was presenting him. He wasn't entirely wrong. The blood on my dress had indeed been prepared beforehand. I possessed a special constitution where once pregnant, the child remained as stable as a mountain, which is precisely why I dared to gamble, using the baby as leverage. When palace attendants escorted him away, his eyes looking at me were filled with venomous hatred. Meanwhile, Sebastian, after learning of my pregnancy, became even more tender and attentive. All kinds of precious rewards continuously flowed into my palace. After safely passing through the crucial first 3 months, fearing I would become bored, he personally arranged various elaborate banquets, inviting the noble ladies of the capital into the palace every few days to keep me company. Elena, with her status as crown princess, was naturally included on the invitation list. That particular day happened to coincide with Sebastian being free from court duties, so he insisted on accompanying me to the banquet. Damien had also been released from house arrest and came with Elena. Today's entertainment featured an exotic new dance from the Imperial Music Bureau. The dancers wore gorgeous revealing costumes, performing barefoot on the elevated platform. Occasionally, some would flirt outrageously with the princes seated on the high platform. Everyone focused intently on enjoying the performance, but Sebastian's eyes never left me from beginning to end. He constantly selected choice morsels of food for me and tenderly wiped my mouth. Before long, the small plate in front of me had accumulated into a veritable mountain of delicacies. I helplessly supported my forehead, laughing with embarrassment. "Your Majesty, do you see Isabella as a pig being fattened?" Sebastian didn't mind at all, coaxing and practically forcing me to eat a fresh fruit. This intimate scene fell into the eyes of the other prince's consorts, immediately raising a wave of envious commentary. Father and mother truly share deep affection. It really makes us sons admire them endlessly. Indeed, indeed. Father usually speaks so little, yet his gentle care for mother is extraordinarily touching. The harmony between Emperor and Empress is truly a magnificent blessing for our nation. Being teased among so many people made me blush deeply, but I didn't miss the dark, resentful look that flashed through Damien's eyes, nor the unwillingness and loneliness clearly visible on Elena's face. Since marrying Damien, she had been extremely favored, becoming the object of intense envy for countless noble ladies throughout the capital. Elena had completely transformed from her previously timid demeanor as a concubine's daughter. Her words and actions were now full of imperious authority. I heard she relied on her favored status to act arrogantly, severely disciplining the concubines in the Eastern Palace. I secretly smiled to myself. She was utterly foolish. Damien favored her only because he desperately hoped she would produce an heir first to consolidate his precarious position. But she mistakenly believed she had married exceptionally well, completely drowning in the honey trap he painted for her. Now I was about to give birth, while Elena, despite possessing a naturally fertile constitution, still showed absolutely no signs of pregnancy despite considerable time having passed. Damien was clearly running out of patience, becoming increasingly cold toward her. How could Elena possibly bear such a drastic change? The evidence was obvious. Just moments ago during the dance performance, Damien's lustful eyes never left the stage, not even glancing at the succulent shrimp Elena had personally peeled for him, causing her profound embarrassment. After the banquet concluded, Damien strode away without regard for Elena struggling to follow behind him in her elaborate court dress. Less than 2 days later, scandalous rumors spread throughout the capital that the crown prince was conducting an illicit affair with an exotic dancer. Those women who had once envied Elena suddenly turned to pitying her instead, spreading countless rumors claiming the relationship between crown prince and crown princess had cooled dramatically because the crown princess was useless and couldn't produce a prince. They also whispered that to force her to conceive quickly, the crown prince made her drink bitter medicinal tonics every single day, causing her to lose her appetite and sleep poorly, visibly withering away. Before long, all the other prince's consorts who had married at the same time as me announced joyful news one after another. They would occasionally gather in my palace chambers to discuss pregnancy care together. The atmosphere was always joyful, harmonious, warm, and wonderfully peaceful. That particular day, Elena came to visit, which surprised me greatly. She had been suffering tremendously over her infertility and felt deeply sad seeing other women pregnant, so she hadn't visited my palace for quite some time. When I saw her, I was even more profoundly shocked. She had become gaunt to the bone, completely lacking the radiant glow of a newlywed bride, looking instead like a withered woman who had recently experienced profound mourning. With just one glance, I understood completely that she had suffered considerably beside Damien. I quickly dismissed all my attendants. Elena looked at me and smiled with bitter irony. "Isabella, seeing me in this miserable state, you must be immensely pleased, aren't you? Do you know how ecstatically happy I was when the Crown Prince chose me? I genuinely believed becoming Crown Princess would finally allow me to suppress you after enduring years living in your shadow. I never expected you would immediately become Empress instead. After that initial disappointment, I was still happy because the Crown Prince treated me with such gentleness and passion. I foolishly thought heaven had taken pity on me and granted me a wonderful husband. But who could have known that after learning I couldn't bear children, he became increasingly cold and cruel. Do you know how unbearably bitter those bowls of medicine taste? He looks at me now with pure disgust, openly flirting with courtesans rather than stepping foot in my chamber." Speaking of this humiliation, her eyes turned red and tears flowed continuously down her hollow cheeks. Everything she spoke of, I naturally understood with crystal clarity. The profound suffering she endured, I had tasted completely during my first lifetime. She sniffled pathetically and hesitantly opened her mouth. "Your Majesty, please help me. I heard from Mother that Rivera daughters are naturally blessed with exceptionally fertile constitutions, and there exist secret fertility enhancement methods. I desperately beg you to share this knowledge so I can finally bear a child for the Crown Prince. These past months I truly cannot endure this torture anymore." Calculating the timeline carefully, before my rebirth they had been married nearly a year. At this exact point in our previous life, she was already preparing to give birth to twin boys for the second prince. But now her womb remained completely empty. No wonder Damien was pressuring her to this desperate extent. Seeing Elena's unwavering determination to bear children for Damien despite everything, I could only shake my head deeply. "Sister, we Rivera daughters are indeed gifted with unique constitutions, and there truly exists medicine to dramatically aid conception. However, this medicine possesses extremely intense, dangerous properties. It must be consumed continuously for 49 full days to prove effective. Are you absolutely certain Damien is worth such an extreme sacrifice?" I tried earnestly to persuade her to abandon this dangerous path because I too had once been stubbornly determined to produce children at any cost, ultimately pushing both myself and my baby to premature death. I desperately didn't want to see her follow that same tragic path. She bit her lip firmly and nodded with resolute determination. "Actually, even without producing children, you remain the Crown Princess. Moreover, the one who cannot produce children is the Crown Prince himself, not you. If you cannot conceive by him, neither can anyone else. Why take such terrible risks?" She laughed bitterly through her tears. "Unexpectedly, in this entire world, only you would truly believe me and defend me. Your Majesty has been treasured since childhood and wouldn't fully understand my desperate feelings. I worked so incredibly hard to obtain everything I have today. I absolutely cannot let it slip away. Bearing a child represents my only remaining chance to completely turn the tables." Seeing her mind was irrevocably made up, I leaned close to her ear and whispered the Rivera family's closely guarded prescription in careful detail. I repeatedly warned her with utmost seriousness that this dangerous medicine must be taken for exactly 49 consecutive days without fail and must be consumed immediately following intimate relations. After ingesting it, the pain would be heart-piercing and agonizing, making one desperately wish for death. She frowned deeply, gritted her teeth with determination, and accepted the formula. Then she solemnly kowtowed with a resounding thud, sincerely expressing her profound gratitude before departing. Soon the time for my own delivery arrived. Sebastian paced nervously outside the delivery chamber, practically wearing a path in the floor. Besides him, There was another person waiting with bated breath. Damien. He was absolutely terrified, fearing desperately that I would successfully give birth to a prince. Having experienced childbirth before, I was mentally prepared, making this time considerably easier. Moreover, my special constitution made my physiology particularly suited for reproduction, so the pain was significantly lighter than for ordinary women. I groaned softly just once, my belly emptied completely, and the baby's vigorous cries echoed powerfully throughout the chamber. Clearly an exceptionally healthy child. I breathed an enormous sigh of relief. You must understand that during my first life, my little treasure had been born dangerously weak, her cries softer than a newborn kitten's, absolutely heartbreaking. Sebastian finally couldn't restrain himself and rushed straight into the delivery chamber. Despite ancient taboos forbidding men from entering, the head midwife immediately carried the baby to him with great ceremony. "Congratulations, Your Majesty. Her Majesty has given birth to a beautiful princess." Sebastian appeared stunned for a brief moment, then burst into genuinely delighted laughter. "Wonderful. A daughter is also wonderful. As long as mother and child are both safe, everything is wonderful." He carefully carried our daughter to me, tenderly wiping the perspiration from my forehead. "Isabella, you've worked so hard. You've given me a precious little princess. I'm infinitely grateful." I smiled weakly, lowering my head to gaze at the baby nestled in swaddling clothes, tears streaming uncontrollably down my face. This child looked exactly like my little treasure from the previous life, except she was extraordinarily healthy, just born and already waving her tiny fists energetically. Indescribably adorable and perfect. She absolutely must be my little treasure reincarnated, finding her way back to me. This time I would definitely protect her with everything I possessed. Sebastian also loved this child with overwhelming devotion, immediately decreeing at her full-month celebration to formally bestow upon her the prestigious title of Princess Sophia. You must understand that according to strict regulations, princesses typically only received official titles upon reaching adulthood. Yet she was being honored at merely 1 month old, clearly demonstrating how extraordinarily high her position was in Sebastian's devoted heart. Even so, malicious whispers still circulated that though mother and child enjoyed tremendous favor without producing a prince, we still fundamentally lacked essential support. However, most guests still raised their ceremonial cups to congratulate me warmly. Only Damien observed with visible contempt and barely concealed hostility. Beside him stood Elena, who had recently become pregnant after enduring so much suffering. Damien stepped directly before me, embracing Elena with exaggerated tenderness, speaking provocatively in a deliberately low voice calculated for my ears alone. "Stepmother, didn't you boldly declare before that you would bear a legitimate son? Where exactly is he? In the end, you only produced a useless daughter. What will you possibly use to compete with me? My crown princess is exceptionally obedient. This time she will definitely bear a fine imperial grandson." Ever since I had given birth to a daughter instead of a son, Damien seemed to have lifted an enormous weight from his heart. His mood improved dramatically, and his treatment of Elena changed noticeably for the better. In the days following her pregnancy announcement, he favored her even more intensely than during their honeymoon period, their displayed affection seeming like passionate newlyweds. Seeing Damien speak so harshly to me, Elena felt somewhat ashamed and quickly pulled him away. I watched her increasingly gaunt, suffering figure retreating, thinking of all the tremendous torture she endured just to become pregnant, and my heart suddenly ached with genuine pity. The time following my delivery passed remarkably quickly, and in what seemed like a blink, Elena's own delivery time arrived. The addition of new members to the imperial family should naturally have been cause for celebration. However, the child she bore immediately sent Damien into an absolutely thunderous rage. It turned out that Elena had given birth to an albino boy, a child with strangely pale, almost translucent skin that appeared deeply unnatural. Damien flew into an uncontrollable rage, striking her viciously and loudly accusing her of committing adultery, wanting to immediately throw the strange-looking child into the palace lake to drown. Elena desperately snatched up the baby and despite her severely weakened condition, rode urgently to the palace seeking His Majesty's intervention. "Father, the Crown Prince wants to murder this innocent child. Father, please make the righteous decision." Please save my baby. Sebastian had never personally witnessed such an unusual child either, immediately summoning the imperial physician to the throne hall for examination. The imperial physician, standing before the entire assembled court, took blood from both Damien's fingertip and the small child's, carefully dropping them into a ceremonial water basin. The blood samples would either merge, confirming blood relation, or separate, proving no connection. Damien insisted with absolute conviction. No need to perform this test. I have black hair, black eyes, and completely normal skin. I absolutely could not have fathered such a monstrous creature. This shameless woman must have been promiscuous, corrupting the pure imperial bloodline. Father, you must immediately execute both mother and child. But in the very next shocking second, the two drops of blood merged seamlessly as one, proving undeniable. Blood relation. Damien stood completely speechless, unable to believe the evidence before his eyes as he violently knocked over the basin in furious denial. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Someone must have tampered with this water. She absolutely cannot have borne such a monster for me. Sebastian spoke with stern authority. Crown Prince, this basin was prepared under my direct personal supervision. Are you daring to doubt me? Damien's face cycled through various shades of green and purple, unable to formulate any response. Seeing the child's parentage irrefutably confirmed, Elena looked up and laughed with bitter hysterical intensity. Father is supremely wise. This is indeed the Crown Prince's biological child. It's precisely because you are impotent, your vitality completely depleted, that I had no choice but to drink that agonizing medicine every single day for 49 consecutive days just to barely give birth to this child. At this point, you still dare to doubt my virtue. Are you still remotely fit to be Crown Prince? These devastating words completely enraged Damien as he raised his hand to violently strike both mother and child. I immediately stepped forward to shield them protectively with my own body. Seeing me intervene, Damien's eyes filled with even more concentrated hatred. Paying absolutely no heed to Sebastian's imposing presence, he snorted with cold contempt. Do you dare interfere in my family affairs? Stepmother, you couldn't even bear a single son yourself. You and Elena are both utterly useless barren wenches. Initially already disappointed in his crown prince, Sebastian could no longer tolerate hearing him speak so disrespectfully to me before the entire court. He shouted with imperial fury, "Unfilial son, no one may show such blatant disrespect to the Empress in my presence." He immediately ordered Damien dragged away by palace guards. I looked at Sebastian with profound gratitude shining in my eyes. He was always like this, steadfastly standing by my side protectively, no matter the circumstances. Tears glimmered in my eyes, but suddenly my chest felt painfully constricted, as if something was lodged there, and I couldn't help but retch violently. Sebastian immediately stepped forward with deep concern as I retched several more times. The imperial physician waiting nearby quickly approached to feel my pulse, his expression showing initial joy that rapidly transformed to grave seriousness, remaining silent for an uncomfortably long time. Imperial physician, what exactly is wrong with the Empress? Sebastian demanded anxiously. The physician responded hesitantly. Your Majesty, Her Majesty is with child again. What? This is wonderfully joyful news. Why the obvious hesitation? The physician rubbed his head nervously. Your Majesty, Her Majesty's pulse suggests not just a single child. It may be twins or possibly even more. My limited abilities prevent me from determining the exact number at this early stage. Sebastian's eyes widened dramatically. He never expected that at over 36 years of age, he could still make me pregnant again, and this time with multiple children simultaneously. I remained calm and composed. My constitution was naturally suited for pregnancy, so carrying multiples was perfectly normal. In the previous life, Elena had even successfully borne healthy triplets for the second prince. Sebastian was absolutely overjoyed, immediately carrying me back to the palace to rest with the utmost care. Fearing that Damien would attempt to harm her vulnerable child, Elena humbly requested permission to remain in the palace for her postpartum confinement, which Sebastian graciously granted. Only Damien remained standing completely dazed in the throne hall, murderous intent blazing dangerously in his dark eyes. During my first pregnancy, He hadn't been overly worried because he still firmly believed Elena would eventually conceive and provide him heirs. Moreover, I had only carried a single child then. But this time was multiples. Who could possibly know if princes would be among them? Furthermore, his devastating inability to father children had been publicly exposed before the entire court. If I successfully delivered healthy children, his precarious position definitely couldn't be maintained. Therefore, he secretly clenched his fists with renewed determination. He absolutely could not allow me to successfully bear any princes. Because I carried multiples, the palace servants became even more extraordinarily careful, making it essentially impossible for Damien to find any opportunity whatsoever to act against me. Soon, my delivery day arrived once again. The familiar, intense pain struck powerfully, and I gritted my teeth to endure it stoically. Perhaps because I carried multiple babies, this time the pain proved considerably more severe than my previous experience. Before long, perspiration completely soaked my entire body. When the midwife pressed her hands firmly on my distended belly, I trembled violently from the unexpectedly sharp pain. The strange, wrong sensation made me suddenly alert with terrifying clarity. I struggled desperately to raise my head and look closely at the midwife, my heart turning cold with dread. The person before me was completely unfamiliar, clearly not the experienced midwife who had skillfully attended my previous delivery. Moreover, that particular pressing motion was fundamentally wrong. It obviously wasn't meant to assist with delivery but rather to deliberately push the babies towards stillbirth within my womb. I screamed in absolute panic. "Who are you? What exactly are you trying to do to me?" The false midwife was clearly surprised by my sudden question, but she attempted to maintain her deceptive composure. "Your Majesty, please calm yourself. This servant naturally came to assist with your delivery. Please exert just a bit more strength and the birth will be complete." I remained deeply uneasy and suspicious. Just as I was about to call loudly for help, I caught the unmistakable murderous glint in her cold eyes, followed immediately by her grabbing the sharp delivery scissors and stabbing straight toward my vulnerable belly with lethal intent. I don't know where I found the desperate strength, but I kicked her away forcefully and shouted toward the door with all my remaining might. This delivery had come suddenly before the labor pains properly began. I knew Sebastian had been detained by urgent diplomatic matters and couldn't return in time. But why wasn't there a single palace servant stationed outside my door as protocol demanded? Seeing the assassin midwife already struggling back to her feet, still gripping the deadly scissors and lunging toward me with renewed murderous intent, my heart sank with desperate finality. Could it possibly be that even in this lifetime, I truly couldn't escape this terrible calamity? I clutched my belly protectively, struggling to endure the overwhelming pain, desperately backing away toward the corner. As the scissors were mere inches from piercing my chest fatally, I closed my eyes tightly in resignation. But the expected agonizing pain never materialized. I opened my eyes in shock to see Elena covered in streaming blood, shielding me protectively with her own body while the assassin midwife lay bleeding profusely on the floor, clearly fatally wounded. Elena spoke with urgent concern. "Isabella, don't be afraid. I'm here now. You're safe." I couldn't hold back my emotions anymore. Tears fell like torrential rain. I truly never expected that at this critical life and death moment, it would be Elena of all people who would sacrifice herself to save both me and my unborn children. Before I could express my overwhelming gratitude, intense pain surged over me in crushing waves. I was about to give birth immediately. Elena helped me onto the bed despite her own serious injuries, gritting her teeth with determination to assist with the dangerous delivery. "Don't be afraid, Isabella. Your Majesty is blessed by heaven. There will definitely be a safe delivery for both mother and children." Encouraged by her brave words, I exerted all my remaining strength, pushing with absolute determination. A bright flash exploded before my eyes, and I heard a newborn's vigorous cry echoing powerfully. "Saved. We're saved. It's a prince. Isabella, congratulations, Your Majesty." Elena exclaimed with genuine joy.